Thank you, Mia. Thank you, seniors, for inviting me to be part of this special occasion. Before we get into the message, I would like to take a few minutes to tell the congregation about some of my memories with these wonderful people up front. I've taught all of these seniors since middle school or earlier, and each one of them has a special place in my heart. I will admit these thoughts are coming very much from the perspective of their music teacher. I also have the privilege of leading the fall junior and senior backpacking trips, so I've walked a ways with some of them too. These seniors are not only musicians and walkers, but athletes, scholars, valuable employees, and more. But they asked me to speak to you, so you're going to hear about music and hiking and a little technology. We'll start with the girls. Last year I started calling them the M&M's, even though it's not at all original. It just made me happy because chocolate. So, Megan, oh perfect, you're closest to me, I didn't even know. I really got to know Megan on a trip to Walla Walla University's Choral Festival her sophomore year. I found out just how silly Megan can be when she and Rachel Carter threatened to throw a blanket over my head while I was driving, but I knew they were too smart to actually do it. Megan also came on the backpacking trip last year and brought some great energy to the trip. And I was excited that she wanted to go back to Walla Walla for the choir festival again this year and continue singing, even joining the honor choir. After taking art for her junior year elective, this year she came back to me and joined advanced band on the trumpet. Michigo, she's farther away. I got to take Michigo on the junior-senior backpacking trip twice, but we kind of cheated the first time. Her cousin Nellie was going to be the only girl who went Michigo's sophomore year, so we made an exception and let me come along, and we were glad we did. The two of them giggling together was always a highlight. Michigo came to CCA in 2018, and she played in the middle school bell choir, learned to play the trumpet, and made it into advanced band the very next year. Since then, she has even practiced her way up to being this year's John Philip Sousa Band Award winner. Mia. Mia is one of the most dedicated musicians I've taught. Last spring, she won the Sousa Award in band for playing the clarinet. And then this past fall, she took a semester off of band in order to spend more time practicing the piano. How can you argue with that? She just had her senior recital here last night, and I hope that many of you were able to come. It was beautiful. One of my favorite memories of Mia was last year on that junior-senior backpacking trip, when suddenly she went from not really caring about walking to suddenly practically running down the trail so fast I could barely keep up. When she finds something she's passionate about, Mia will work harder than anyone. And then there's the boys. Do you recognize that picture, Jed? Jed played euphonium in the band, a member of the all-important low brass section. He even tried tuba for a little while when I asked, although that didn't really stick. A funny memory I have with Jed is this picture here from the band trip 2 years ago. When I make kids go hiking, they often find creative, interesting ways to make it tolerable. What is Jed doing here? Well, Jed managed to pull a fish out of a little stream, and it was actually the top memory a lot of the kids had from the whole trip, even though I took them to a trampoline park and all kinds of stuff. Supposedly there was even a part about the fish getting kissed, but you'll have to ask Jed about that. Jed has always been so respectful and is known for thanking his teachers at the end of every class. In my scrolling through my phone, I searched for photos of Ian, and I found nothing. Probably because I haven't actually gone on a trip with Ian. I don't think, not that I can remember. But I do have some great other memories with Ian. When this group took technology class from me their freshman year, Ian was in his element. While other students were scrambling to pass the basic requirements, Ian was ready to move ahead almost immediately. In the 3D printing unit, other students designed a cube with their first initial on it in Braille. Ian did his whole name. I mean, there are only 3 letters, but still his whole name. He designed a gear to replace one that had gotten lost. And when we did some simple JavaScript coding on Khan Academy, they were just supposed to make a few stationary fish, but instead, Ian animated a whole bunch of fish that kept appearing and appearing on the screen until they covered it, and then text appeared, "Too many fish." It was perfect Ian humor. Most of this year, at the end, well, I don't get to teach Ian this year, so I see him other places. Most of this year, at the end of each day, the fifth graders would block him in with around their lockers. They would mill around their lockers as they got ready to leave, and they would block him in with his giant trash cart so he couldn't start his rounds through the school. But Ian is never impatient, and he would just joke that it let him get paid for doing nothing, even though we all knew that he was absolutely ready to get the job done. So seniors, we have many memories together, more than we really have time for now. And although I wasn't their very first choice for this sermon, I was honored to take Vicki Downer's place as she walks through some medical challenges with her family members this quarter. Shortly after you asked me to speak for this event, Mr. Ringering asked me to choose a scripture reading, and I asked him what your class verse and motto were. The verse has been read already today, Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. I told Mr. Ringering I was happy to go in that direction, but inside, I was thinking, oh no, that verse doesn't give me any direction for a sermon. Every graduation talk is about hope and a future. Plus, this verse honestly has always seemed a little cliche to me, a little too happy. Or maybe from another perspective, it feels like a lot of pressure to find God's specific plan and follow it. Don't mess up. One wrong turn might lead you completely away from God's plan. Alas, some direction is better than no direction, and I began to think about it off and on. You're going to hear some of my personal journey with this verse and with God this year. This has been a very full and busy spring, and my sleep schedules tends to suffer in the days leading up to trips and concerts. The day before the elementary spring concert, May 15, the first sentence in my prayer journal read, I wonder if my dad is this tired and still drags himself out of bed every morning. Because I know as a rule, my dad gets way less sleep than I do, and he gets up even earlier than I do. But I had pried my eyes open to read, and then I wrote, and then I was out the door on my running, I don't need coffee run. 99% of the time, I listen to podcasts or audiobooks. But that morning, I needed energy, something different. A glance at the sky made me think of one of my favorite morning songs, Nobody Loves Me Like You by Chris Tomlin. So I opened Apple Music. I hadn't expected it, but that song was at the top of my Christian music playlist. So I hit play and I set off. The first time I heard this song was at the Oregon Conference Bible Camp, one of my first years at CCA when you all were still in elementary maybe. The first verse is my favorite. Morning, I see you in the sunrise every morning. It's like a picture that you painted for me, a love letter in the sky. But the second verse is what really spoke to me that morning. Story. I could have had a really different story, but you came down from heaven to restore me, forever saved my life. And so I started thinking as I ran about how my story could have been different. 11 years ago, I was finishing up my 5th year teaching at a public junior high school in Lewiston, Idaho. I loved the kids and we made great music together, but it was empty. I had turned in my notice that I wouldn't be returning in the fall, and I had decided the only way I was going to continue teaching music was if it was at a Christian school. Just when I was the most unsure about what my future held, I got a phone call from Larry Marsh, then the superintendent of education for the Upper Columbia Conference. My mom works at the UCC and had told Larry some of the things I was going through, and at the same time, late in the hiring season by Adventist standards, he was trying to help CCA fill its music teacher position. I submitted my resume, came for an interview, and was offered the job within maybe not even a week. It happened so fast. I practically floated through the door God had opened for me. I continued running, and the next song from the playlist came on. It was another song I first heard at Bible camp. And I'm not much of a crier, but this one will often bring tears to my eyes. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness. You give hope, you restore every heart that is broken, and great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. Shortly before I was hired at CCA, the devil tried to take my breath away, but God won. And sometimes I've wondered why. Why did God put his breath in my lungs? Why am I here? Why are any of us here? What does God want me to do with the life he has given me? So I'm running, and all these thoughts are floating around me. And I listened and I ran, and then I had this distinct realization. It was the coolest thing, that God was with me. I know it sounds cliche, but God was with me, like I could imagine him next to me running along the canal. And in that moment, a lot of things kind of came together for me. Now, running, walking, hiking, as mentioned before by Mia, these are things that I enjoy and I do often. And there may not be many stories anyways, in the Bible about God going for a run, but there are a few important ones about God walking. More specifically, God walking with humans. So we're going to take a walk through a few texts about walking. It starts off right at the beginning. In Genesis 3, God comes to the Garden of Eden to walk in the cool of the evening. He calls to Adam, "Where are you?" Because he didn't come to walk alone. He wants to spend time with his creation, with you. A couple chapters later in Genesis 5, we find God walking with Enoch. Their relationship so close that God took him rather than allowing him to die. In the next chapter, Genesis 6, we see Noah walking with God amidst extreme corruption and violence. His walk with God created the faith it took to build the ark and to be saved from the flood. Forward a few books, in Leviticus, chapter 26 contains a promise. If Israel followed God's commands, many blessings would come, good harvests, peace in the land, and God walking among them, his people. This one is so important that Paul quotes it later in 2 Corinthians 6, reminding the church to walk in the light. God wants to walk with us. And then the next reference I found to walking is a really well-known children's Bible story. In Daniel 3, Daniel's friends refuse to bow down to the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar has erected. They're thrown into the fiery furnace. When the king looks over, he sees the three men, plus one who looks like the Son of God. And the thing that's kind of odd to me, that I don't know if I ever realized before, is they're walking. They're in the fiery furnace. They're not just standing there, they're walking. I don't know why. Maybe someone can find some significance to this. But whatever the reason is, there they are, obedient unto death, and then walking directly with God in the fire. Pretty cool. I have one more walking passage. This is one of my favorite verses, Micah 6, verse 8. He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God? So how do we walk with God? This question, the answer to this question, is the journey of a lifetime. I have wondered this for many years, tried to figure out what my ideal devotional life looks like, waited for someone to give me the best recipe for my walk with God. That uncertainty, that perfectionism, kept me from actually starting for a long time. I bet this has happened to you, seniors. You have a big assignment, a speech, an essay, some multi-day, multi-week project. Your teacher gave you plenty of time, but every time you sit down to do it, you just don't know where to begin. What if you head in the wrong direction? What if you have to start over? What if it doesn't turn out very good? And so you procrastinate long enough that the end product is almost certain not to be great. Does this sound familiar? Got a couple of smiles. Many students struggle with this even on smaller assignments. What if I mess up? What if everybody else does it a different way? By not beginning, we guarantee failure. People do this with health and fitness too, since we're talking about walking. In fact, I would like to give you the encouraging words that becoming an adult just provides you with a whole bunch of new things to procrastinate on. So as we consider our health and fitness journey, maybe we think, I don't want to make that diet change, or I don't want to exercise because I might mess up, might not work, might be hard. But to me, that's the reason that all these places in the Bible, it talks about walking with God. not running an ultramarathon, not competing in an Ironman, not doing burpees, not even doing pull-ups, just walking. The one exercise that basically everyone can do. It doesn't take any special equipment or traveling to a particular location. To walk, all you have to do is walk. This school year, I finally started to walk with God in a way that has stayed consistent. I don't want to make it sound like I've never tried before, but I feel like all of the things that I've tried have petered out over and over and over, and I feel like some of you can relate to this, that you just keep trying and, oh, that didn't really stick, and then you try and it doesn't really stick. I've had so many starts in the past that there seemed to be no guarantee it would stick this time. And my strategy? Not interesting, not creative. Instead of the alarm going off at 5:30 and me going straight to exercise like I was last school year, now the alarm is set to 5. I start with reading a book, usually the Bible, and writing a page in a journal. I've discovered, after many years of resisting the idea of writing anything in a journal, because when I was little, I used to write everything in the journal, like what I ate and like how many slices of bread and like everything, and it was awful. But I've discovered it's the only way I can keep my thoughts focused. Parts of the page look more like a regular journal than a prayer, but I'm conscious throughout that I'm writing to God. I'm telling him about real stuff going on in my life, asking for wisdom when I teach you and when you try my patience, asking him to write a sermon for me. When the page is full, then I go for my run or do my setups. Again, I want to say it's not flashy, it's not fancy, it's not unique. It's almost embarrassing to talk about. And I am embarrassed that it took me well into my 30s to feel like I had found a routine. But for me, I had to realize that it's just like walking. You just have to start. I don't know if it'll look the same in 5 years. We get new shoes, we walk new places. Yours may look different too. I'm not saying that the prescription is writing a page in a journal and reading every morning at 5. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. But the important part is that it happens, that we start walking with God and we just don't stop. Of course, the ongoing challenge is not just at 5 a.m. The ongoing challenge is the rest of the day too. When I don't know what to do with a talkative class, or a music trip detail isn't working out, or I get a rude email, I have to remember that I'm still walking with God. He's walking with me. We can talk about it. I can whisper the prayer for help and try my best to listen for the answer, walking together and talking together. Amazingly, this walking stuff ties in seamlessly with your class motto. Do or do not. There is no try. You just walk. Just start. You don't have to try to have a relationship with God. You just make the choice to walk with him, to spend time with him, and there you are, walking with him. Not trying, but actually doing the thing. Can we go back to your class verse again? I sat down to study more, and I found the context of Jeremiah 29:11 to be helpful. King Nebuchadnezzar had taken away many Israelites to Babylon as captives. Jeremiah is still in Jerusalem, and he writes this letter, a message from God to the exiles. First, he tells them to essentially go ahead and settle in, because they're going to be there for a while. Build homes, plant gardens, marry and have children, grandchildren, work for the peace and prosperity of the city where they are exiled. In verse 10, it says, "You will be in Babylon for 70 years, but then I will come and do for you all the good things I have promised, and I will bring you home again. For I know the plans that I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. In those days when you pray, I will listen. If you look for me wholeheartedly, you will find me. I will be found by you, says the Lord. I will end your captivity and restore your fortunes. I will gather you out of the nations where I sent you, and will bring you home again to your own land." So we see God's people in a tough place, and God wants them to know that they would be brought home again. I wonder how many of them took a negative view of this. 70 years is a long time. For many, that probably meant they would die in Babylon before the time was up. But the promise was there for them to grasp, that God had a plan for their future, and it was good. It still may not make my personal top 5 Bible verses, but that really is beautiful. Now, all of this talking that I've been doing, this was all coming from songs. Like if you remember way back to the beginning, when I started on my run, I put on music. And I think it's really interesting that all of my thoughts kind of developed from these songs that I had heard in Bible camp many years ago. So here's my little music teacher moment. It's amazing the things that will stay with you when they come in the form of a song. So I asked the seniors about some songs that have been meaningful in their walk with God. I want to share their answers with you. Jed is the one song that we're actually not going to sing together today, and it's not at all personal, Jed, I promise. Jed said he's been blessed with the song See Me Through It. I didn't know this one, which is probably part of why we're not singing it. And so I looked it up. What fantastic lyrics. You guys should look it up too. Days are getting dark. Life's a little hard. I don't got this. I know you've got this. And then my personal favorite line of this song. When the sky falls, who am I going to call? The one who put it up there in the first place. It's just like so smart, right? That's right, Jed. God's got this. Just walk with him. Mia told me about Lord, I Need You. She appreciates its beautiful message, but I love how she said she also has special memories attached to it. This was her dad's favorite song. She says it might still be. So they listened to it a lot when she was little, and she sang it for church with her sister. Mia, never forget that you need God, and he loves to have you ask for help. Megan loves Be Thou My Vision because it's beautiful, and it reminds her that God is with her through it all. That's another favorite of mine, a prayer of submission to God. Megan, if he is your vision, that is all you need. The plans will fall in place as you walk with him. Michigo has found goodness of God to be meaningful. She says, he gave me strength to get through tough obstacles, and this song just reminds me each day to thank him for all he's done for me. His mercy never fails me. Michigo, he will keep giving you strength. And in my experience, and I don't have the most experience in this room, but I have some, this song just gets more and more meaningful the more that he has brought you through. Ian told me he really likes Amazing Grace. Ian, can I tell you a story about Amazing Grace and one of my favorite memories? It's a bittersweet memory, though. Maybe more bitter, I don't know. Bittersweet is an interesting term we could probably spend a long time on. Spring break of 2005, before y'all were born, the orchestra from Southern Adventist University went on tour to Europe. Some of you have heard little memories I have from that trip, like our principal trumpet player who made it across the Atlantic without his trumpet, the bus drivers who would not open the bathrooms or stop for breaks, so we all got intentionally dehydrated so that we would avoid relieving ourselves into water bottles in the back of the bus like some of our friends had to do. There were fancy malls and cars in Monaco and interesting art at the Dali Museum. One of our excursions was to Torre Pellice in the Italian Alps, where the Waldenses stood firm in their faith, hiding in caves to escape persecution and death. We were inspired by the determination and strong will of these faithful souls who clung so tenaciously to their beliefs which were based solely and completely on the Bible. We visited the Waldensian temple built on a hilltop in the 1800s, and we sang together in that temple, Amazing Grace. It's a cool building, a tiny little chapel, maybe a quarter the size of this sanctuary, wood pews, wood floor, some kind of hard concrete type surface on the walls, amazing acoustics, better than singing in any bathroom. And so we sang together in that space, Amazing Grace. All of us trained musicians, all of us singing out our hearts to thank God for his grace. Our harmonies reverberating in the small chapel. I felt God in a very distinct way that day, calling to me to accept his grace. And I didn't say no exactly, but I didn't jump in with both feet at that time. Over time, the friends that I chose led me in a different direction. Not so much walking with God, but rather waving hello once in a while. Amazing grace it is, indeed, that draws us back to him. Ian, keep that grace front and center before you as you walk with God. Church, what song is it that draws you to God? I'm almost certain that the ones the seniors have mentioned are on many of your lists as well. Do not neglect these songs. God will walk with you in word and in prayer and in music. So that morning, running along the canal, things I've known my whole life fell into place in a new way. Why did God put his breath in my lungs? Why is my story turning out this way? I found the answer. God wanted to walk with me. One thing I love about walking, especially hiking, is to look back after a while and see how far I've come. Some of you have been up to Kolchak Lake and beyond, perhaps, up Asgard Pass. It's so incredible. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. You walk up for a few minutes, and then when you're out of breath, when the view is too tempting to resist, you look down and you see the lake that was once like your whole field of vision, gradually shrinking as you climb higher and higher. Or the days of hiking when I've been able to be on a long backpacking trip, multi-days, multi-weeks with my husband, hiking for hours and hours and then not even being able to see where I started that morning. It's just cool to see that kind of progress and be like, wow, I just went from there to there. I want to point out that this year, I started my consistent mornings with God, but I did not notice anything right away. It's only as I begin to look back and get that perspective that I see really any progress. It took until May before I realized that walking with God was the purpose that he has for my life. So don't get impatient. This is a long walk we're on. Keep at it. So seniors, church, what is God's plan for you? The one he has to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you hope and a future. As mentioned earlier, this stressed me out a little when I was your age. What if I didn't discover the plan he had? What if I made the wrong choice and sabotaged that plan? But now I think that his plan primarily is just to walk with you. Are there better and worse options for you? Yes, absolutely. But the closer you walk with God, the better decisions you will make. You'll be able to talk and listen to God and receive his guidance along the way. But no matter which path you've ended up on, keep your walking shoes handy and just choose to walk with him. Remember, do or do not. There is no try.